Blog Talk Radio.
Well, good morning and welcome to Dynamic Word Bible Studies. This is your host, Felicia DeRozier, and my co-host, Ross. And that was a little bit of a weird countdown because I still have numbers on the screen here saying that we haven't started yet. But we're going to go with that audio cue, and we're going to guess that we're getting started today. We have a really great episode in store today. I'm actually so excited to talk about this. I give Ruthie thumbs up. Goofy thumbs up. Are you excited to talk about this? Do you know what we're talking about?
I don't know what we're talking about, so I can't say I'm excited.
Today we're going to be talking about the woman at the well. Now you're excited about talking about this, right? This is like what a
super nerd about this section.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm so glad. I think I have geeked out significantly about this section too, so we'll probably have a lot to share.
Summer camp, my session's right.
Okay, was there something said about the woman at the well at summer camp? She did a whole teaching on it. Okay.
I remember the movie Lots of Chosen episode there.
That's right. Yes, and she's actually meeting us underneath our post there. Fortuna, I believe, is what her name is in the Chosen, and I think it's also in Catholic tradition. Anyway,
like that.
Yes, so we'll talk about the woman's well. I'm so excited, but let's go ahead and start with our commercials, and then we will get back to the substance of our teaching in just a few minutes.
Please check out the Barefoot is Legal radio show right here on Saturdays, 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That is 10:30 a.m. to noon Pacific Time, as we show you all about your barefoot rights and living a barefoot lifestyle. And for more information about the 501c3 nonprofit Barefoot is Legal, please check out barefootislegal.org.
Food waste is one of the most easily solvable problems, literally the low-hanging fruit of environmentalism. Pardon the pun, it's my job.
About 20% of all produce never makes it off the farm.
It's because they just look a little funny, a little weird, but when you cut into it, it's perfectly good food.
It's just a total shame. It's totally good stuff.
We buy ugly produce directly from farms that often would go to waste because supermarkets won't buy it because of how it looks, and we deliver it to people's doors.
Beauty standards for an apple.
This isn't that ugly at all. Like, that's the most common first box complaint we get.
We change that. We educate people. We show them how amazing these fruits and vegetables are.
To have food delivered to your house.
Box of produce every week.
And it's more affordable.
At a very reasonable price.
Cheaper than the grocery store.
I spend a lot less time in grocery stores.
It's an adventure every time that you open your box.
High quality produce.
There's nothing wrong with the produce.
And they taste exactly the same, if not better.
Save those fruits and vegetables that get wasted every year.
And it's delivered to your door
But why wouldn't you do?
Please go to our website, freedomizerradio.live, and sign up for Imperfect Foods today. Use our promo code and get money off your first order. Go ahead and get some organic and all-natural meats, dairy, snacks, breads, and non-GMO produce.
Just as ungrounded signals wreak havoc on radio communications, there's growing concern that because we are not grounded, we absorb tremendous amounts of electromagnetic radiation from our modern devices. EMF stands for electromagnetic field.
We are all immersed in electromagnetic fields, from Wi-Fi, from the wiring in our homes, and it disturbs our electrical balance. We get charged. Inside of our bodies, we get electrically charged. Some people have as much as 20 volts on their bodies, and that's not good for you.
The information is provided for general informational purposes only. The contents are not intended or implied to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Ground Therapy Incorporated makes no representations about the efficiency, appropriateness, or suitability of any specific tests, procedures, treatments, services, opinions, healthcare providers, or other information that may be contained in or available through the information provided.
All right, guys, well, welcome back. We're really excited to talk about this. I knew I was excited to talk about it. Now I know Cross is excited to talk about it.
I know Pongo's excited to talk about it.
Pongo's here, right? He's got a goofy face. He's laying on his back and showing us his belly, so he's very, very happy. All right, so we're going to talk about the woman of the well. If you're following along through Scripture with us, we're going to be picking up in the book of John, chapter 4. And we're just going to kind of, we'll actually be in the story, I think, for a couple weeks, because there's some other things that I wanted to pick up on within this story. But today we're going to talk about who is the woman at the well.
So John 5?
So it's John chapter 4, and we're going to read from verses 2 through 42. It's a familiar story, but it's always worth reading again. John 4, 2 through 42. A lot of scripture. I have it all here if you want it. Okay. Cross is highlighting it, so we're going to give him a second to highlight it. Okay. He says for me to go ahead and start. Here we go. So starting up there, now he had to go through Samaria. So he came to...
So for a little bit of background, the Jews and Samaritans were, so in Kings, I believe.
Second Kings, I think.
Yeah. So Israel split, and they split because they had to travel to,
There's a whole story, but let's read the scripture first.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why they split, but so Jews were part of the, I don't remember if it was Northern or Southern Kingdom.
Both.
Remember. Oh.
Everyone was Jewish. Let's get into that story, and we'll talk about it in detail once we read the scripture. Do you want to read it? Oh, okay. He's going to read it on his own phone. He likes his phone better. Okay. Or do you want me to read it?
Just read it.
Okay, I'm going to read it. Okay, now he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar. Near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came out to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone to town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You're a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Also, men of that time didn't really talk to women. So that was like a whole other level there.
Unless they wanted to.
Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asked you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give him will never thirst again. Indeed, the water I give him will become a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so I will not go thirsty. I have to keep coming here to draw water." And he told her, "Go and call your husband back." "I have no husband," she replied. Jesus said to her, "You're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is that you have had 5 husbands, and the man you have now is not your husband. What you have said is quite true." "Sir," the woman said, "I can see that you're a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." "Woman," he replies, "believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming and has now come when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks, spirit and in truth." The woman said, "I know that Messiah, called the Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us." Then Jesus declared, "I, the one speaking to you, I am he." Just then his disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking to a woman, but no one asked, "What do you want?" or "Why are you talking with her?" Then, leaving her jar, the woman went back to town and said to the people, Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be Messiah? They came out of town and made their way towards him. Meanwhile, the disciples urged him, Rabbi, eat something. But he said to them, I have food to eat that you know nothing about. Then his disciples said to each other, could someone have brought him food? My food, said Jesus, is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. Don't you have a saying, is it still 4 months until harvest? I tell you, open your eyes and look to the fields. They are ripe for harvest. Even now the one who reaps draws a wage and harvest of a crop for eternal life, so that the sower and the reaper may be glad together. Thus the saying, one sows and another reaps is true. I sent you to reap what you have not worked for. Others have done the hard work, and you have reaped the benefits of their labor. Many of the Samaritans from the town believed him because of the woman's testimony. He told me everything I ever did. So when the Samaritans came to him, they urged him to stay with them, and he stayed 2 days. And because of his word, many more became believers. They said to the woman, we no longer believe just because of what you said. We now have heard for ourselves, and we know that this man is really the Savior of the world. So, let's talk, before we get into Samaritans and what's the deal with the Samaritans, okay? Let's just say, to begin with, and we're going to get into the details of this, okay? Samaritans and Jews didn't get along, right? Okay? They had this long-standing feud. It was bad.
That goes down generations,
and like at this point, hundreds of years.
Generations.
And so I find it really strange that the verse begins.
So Gen X and Gen Z or Gen Z?
So Gen B, is that it? That's funny. So the verse begins in this rather peculiar way, considering the context of Jewish belief in the story. Jesus is just with his disciples, and they're baptizing, right? And they're baptizing. I actually looked it up, so I was like, because we have all these chapter breaks in the Bible, and so this is actually taking place in chapter 3 where they're baptizing. So if you look back at chapter 3, you'll find out that they're baptizing. Hold on, I wrote it down just to make sure that I said it right here. They're at the River Jordan, and they're baptizing in E19 near Salem in the southern part of Judea. All of a sudden, the disciples and Jesus are getting all sorts of attention, and really it's attention from people who don't want attention from yet, okay? People who are going to ask a lot of questions, people involved in the
paparazzi.
Like, he's trying to get away from paparazzi, sure, He's trying to get away from the religious establishment.
Today's celebrity.
He would be, but he's really trying to get away from today's religious establishment. They are not going to be pleased with him. He knows that. And he's trying to get a safe distance from them at this point. Now,
they're trying not to throw their careers away and be, super mean to him, but they're also trying to, pressure him.
Right. Okay, so let's get a visual picture of where he's at. He is on the banks of the River Jordan, baptizing, okay? Literally wading waist deep into the River Jordan. And he's in the southern part of Israel. But, the northern part of the southern part of Israel. Makes sense?
Northern.
Right. So there's this land in between kind of dividing the two lands of Israel at this point called Samaria. And we'll explain a little bit about where the Samaritans and where Samaria came from, because it's really a part of Israel. Okay.
Jumping back, the part where the split actually happened was with David's grandson. His name is Rehoboam.
Mm-hmm.
And he was worse than Solomon. It's pretty hard to believe, because Solomon was just horrible for the last half. Right. And God said to Solomon, if you obey me, I will give you gold and long life. And he said the same thing to Rehoboam, and he's just like, I'm just going to do my own thing. And so Israel hated him so much because he went to his advisors for kind of assistance on what to say to the people, because they're like, hey, so your dad was really rough on us, and if you lighten our load, we'll show you faithful. But if you don't, we won't. And so we go to his advisors, and the older advisors tell him to hear the cries of his people and to let him vote a little bit. But his younger advisors, probably his friends that he hired to be his advisors, say that the people will think he's weak if he lightens their loads. So he does their loads instead, and they'll rebel and split.
Okay. Yes. So at that point in time in history, there's a divided kingdom, and the southern kingdom is called Judea.
The northern kingdom is called Israel.
The northern kingdom is called Israel. So for context, he's in Judea.
Right.
Okay.
So
but kind of the top of Judea, and then between what lies in that northern land, between where Jesus is and where he wants to go to Galilee, which is in Israel proper, there's this land of Samaria.
And
okay.
So Israel had kings from the line of David, and Judea had like regular. Right.
I feel like it was opposite that.
Oh yeah.
I feel like it was because I do recall, and I didn't go through that whole history there. I do recall that Israel fell before Judea, and I really feel like that was the case. So here's the deal: he has to get across the land, and typically because of the fact that there's beef between the Samaritans and the Israelites, and I don't think I really realized how bad the beef was until I started researching this, because a lot of times, like, you would see that, like, observant Jews would do all sorts of things that you're like, is that really that big of a deal? They used to call the Pharisees the bruised priests, because they would look down every time that they saw a woman to keep themselves from sinning, and they would often run into walls because of it. You know what I mean? Like, their tactics to avoid things, to me, seem extreme sometimes, right? And so sometimes just seems a little extreme. And so to the point, it didn't seem unusual to me what they would do. But actually, when a Jewish traveler, was set to travel between that northern and southern kingdom, they're no longer kingdoms; they're all owned and run by Rome at this point. Instead of actually traveling through Samaria, they would cross the River Jordan, walk around, and then cross the River Jordan again. Okay? So the reason why I think it's kind of weird that it says that he had to cross through Samaria is he didn't have to. There was clearly another way.
Now, a lot of Jews would take.
But everybody else would have taken.
They hated Samaria.
Right. So there was totally another way. And by the way, he's already wading waist deep in the river that he has to cross to avoid going into Samaria. So
another interesting thing that stuck out to me a little is in this story, the time that it's set in is new.
Yes. Okay. We'll get to that. But let me finish this one thought really quick, because I promise I'll even let you talk about it. Okay. But let's talk really quick about this word "had," because I've never looked it up before. Okay. I've never looked at this word up before, and I was like, what do they mean? He had to cross into Samaria. He super didn't have to. Like, he could have gone the other way. Like, it's not like he was in a rush to get to Galilee. He was just in a rush to get out of the area he was in, right?
Right, because people were trying to kill him for use.
Well, not yet, but they were definitely asking questions. Like, it wasn't like his life was in danger. And even if it was, you would think that crossing the river would be sufficiently inconvenient to keep people from following him. He super didn't have to go. So I looked up the word that is translated in this verse as "had," and the word is "die." Okay, and it means not only that it's necessary, but also that it's a proper duty, that it is the appropriate thing to do. Okay, and so somehow we have recorded here that it's Jesus' intention rather than the geographic necessity. Jesus could have gone the other way, but he intended to go through Samaria because it was proper and part of his duty. Now, we're going to come back to that meeting being at 12, but let's first talk about what's wrong with those Samaritans. And I know you're itching to talk about that, okay? So, do you want to cover what you know about the Samaritans first, and then I'll kind of fill in?
So, first off, they were Gentiles. All the Jews thought they were unclean.
Okay. No, we're exactly Gentiles.
Right. They just thought, well, you guys don't have Jerusalem, so we're better than you. They kind of looked down on them.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it.
Also, the Jews kind of thought, like, that they were just, that they only had the law and that they were the only descendants of Jacob, which is probably not true.
Okay.
But they thought that they were directly in Abraham's bloodline, which is why they kind of looked down the Gentiles.
Okay, so, yes, mostly right, but I'm going to give you some context on all that, okay? Okay. So we're trying to figure out what the hate is all about, right? Like, why all the hate? So the Jews and the Samaritans have this long, turbulent history. It's kind of like the neighbor that you love to hate, okay? Like, they knew of each other. They were spending all sorts of time, like, frustrating each other.
They're just kind of poking at each other, but, like, in two countries that have beef way.
Okay, so check this out. They used to be one country, right? Like, it's all used to be one people. So here comes, do you remember back in Daniel's time, there's this great exile to Babylon where the Assyrians come, they conquer all of Israel, right? And then they start capturing all the brightest, the smartest, most talented from Israel. And they take them captive to Babylon to serve in the palace of the king. Do we remember all this?
Daniel.
Yeah, so yeah, check out the book of Daniel. There's all sorts of stuff about that. So the Samaritans were spared exile to Babylon. They remained in Israel and really in that central part of the of what would have been Israel proper, the southern part of the kingdom of Israel, if that makes sense. Okay, so we're going to start off with, are these the best and brightest that Israel had to offer?
No.
Probably not. Probably they're going to be, like, for lack of a better term, and I have nothing against Australians, but the Australians of the British Kingdom, right? Like the Brits sent all of their convicts and stuff down to Australia, right?
Also, funny thing to mention, the Edomites, those are Esau's descendants. This is a story that most people don't remember in the Bible because it's a very small part of a very small book. It's one of the minor prophets. So the Edomites were actually celebrating the Israelite destruction.
Sure. Like, the people around were very, very happy about this. Okay.
And I believe it's in Malachi. He confessed them, and he's just like, "Hey, what are you doing?"
Right.
And yeah, that's the whole thing.
That's the whole thing too. So while Edom is celebrating, these, the best and brightest from Israel are being exiled to Babylon. Those that remain behind, you can imagine it's very sparsely populated now, right? Like they've taken captive many of the people, and so
see, this is when your ignorance saves you.
Is it?
When being dumb is your ally.
Okay. So only kind of. So now what happens is the Assyrians start to move new people groups in, Gentile people groups in, to the land of Israel to help occupy the territory. And so much so that the Israelites, now one of the major tenets of the religion is that you're supposed to marry another Jew, right? They start to intermarry with these people who are living within their borders. It's kind of indicative of the fact that the Samaritans have kind of lost hope of the restoration of Israel. They're no longer keeping to their Israeli ties because they've kind of lost hope that this is ever going to be one nation again, and they have started to assimilate with the population. And so that's kind of the first thing that happens there. They start to, and so like they start to intermarry, they start to build families. Subsequently, generations down, the Jews don't consider them ethnically Jewish. They actually will call them half-breeds, which, not a very generous term, right? Okay. So there, and obviously, it's not just, you have to understand, it's not just Gentiles. It's their enemy Gentiles, the ones that took them into captivity. In fact, they become so intertwined with these Gentiles that they actually join them in war against Judea. So they begin fighting against their own people as a part of this other race. And then as Hellenistic, that's like Greek influences start coming in, laws come down requiring Jews to worship in the way that they're supposed to, according to the Greek laws. And, of course, the Jews revolt against this, think the Maccabean War. Okay? But the Samaritans accept this and actually build a temple for Zeus on their mountain where they worship God. And so this isn't this isn't going to go well with them and their brothers, the Jews. They are not going to like each other at this point. Okay, because at this point you have intermarried with the enemy, you have fought alongside the enemy against your brothers, you have abandoned the true worship of God, and apparently there was something off about their scriptures too. And I don't have a whole lot of details about that, but that they didn't have the same Pentateuch as the Jewish nation did.
Right.
So many problems, and now we can truly understand conflict. Like, it's not just, we learn in church that, the Jews had a problem with the Samaritans. Yeah, they did, but it wasn't just like the Jews didn't like these people. There was bloodshed between them. There was brotherhood broken between them. It was a big deal. And so we can kind of understand to a certain degree where the Jews would have been pretty put off by these Gentile Samaritans, right? Does that all make sense? So we get thoroughly into that. Now we understand what was wrong with Samaritans, right? Okay. So did this particular Samaritan woman do anything wrong?
Probably not.
Not to this level, okay?
And not to Jesus, probably to other people, which actually ties into the fact that she went at noon, because most of the women would go early in the morning, right, because that's the coolest part of the day, and the reason they wouldn't go at night when it's also cooler is because then they wouldn't have water for the whole day.
Right.
So.
And we live in a desert.
Right. So we understand about temperatures being hottest at noon.
Like, it's summer.
Okay.
It's summer. If you need to go do something, when are you going to do it, Tom?
Never. I'm just going to stay inside the house.
Okay. But if that's not possible, and you have to go do something, right? It's bad right now. It's, here.
We don't even want to get in our cars right now.
Right. It's getting better. I want to say it's like 108, 109 as a high, which it was like 115, 116 a few weeks ago. But
our cars absorb so much heat that when we start driving, we open our windows because the outside is cooler than our
Right. It's bad. So you can imagine, like, let's put it this way. If you have a choice to run an errand, okay, and you could do it at 7 a.m. or noon, we're not even going to talk about the nighttime. She doesn't wait that long. So 7 a.m. or noon, when are you going to do it? 7, especially if it's outside work, right?
Right.
Because it's just like, I like sleep as much as anybody, but it's just too dang hot, right? Like you'll die. Like, this is a health crisis waiting for you, okay? So the fact that she's coming at noon is indicative of her social standing.
Right. So,
okay, because also remember that females can't even go to the bathroom by themselves. Like, not even in modern times. We always have to travel in a gaggle, right? Like, am I wrong? Us girls, we like to travel together, right? And so, like, in modern days, it's, okay, let's all go to the bathroom. But in those times, you can imagine, it was probably not very safe for a single woman to be traveling outside of town, because the well was located outside of town. It wasn't within the town. So she's having to walk quite a distance.
She's so shamed in her town that she has to go when nobody else is there to go because it's so dang hot.
don't know if I'd say shamed, but let's just say ostracized, because I have some interesting details to tell you about the woman at the well that you may not know yet, but we'll do it after this commercial break. How's that? Okay, we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Of all the grounding studies, the one that really got our attention is called Electric Grounding Improves Vagal Tone in Preterm Infants. In the study, 26 premature babies in an NICU were connected to grounding wires. The heart rates of the grounded infants stabilized, and their vagal tone, a critical measure of infant health, increased by 67% with grounding.
The information is provided for general informational purposes only. The contents are not intended or implied to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Ground Therapy Incorporated makes no representations about the efficiency, appropriateness, or suitability of any specific tests, procedures, treatments, services, opinions, healthcare providers, or other information that may be contained in or available through the information provided.
Have you looked at the price of Bitcoin lately? Cryptocurrencies are the hottest financial investment right now. Well, what if you can get free Bitcoin fractions by having an app on your phone or PC? Introducing Lolly, a website that rewards you with free Bitcoin pieces with your online purchases. You purchase from one of thousands of companies like Chewy, Old Navy, Groupon, and others. You get a % of your purchase back in Bitcoin. Use my link on freedomizerradio.live or find me on Facebook for your special link to get started. Lolly, earn free Bitcoin while you shop. Hello, everyone. I want to introduce you to our friends at Marty.com. At Marty, you can stock up on all your pantry items and other household items for way, way cheaper than traditional grocery stores. I like that most of the items are organic. Also, I really dig their 1 cent deal of the day. It changes every single day. I recently snagged a 10-ounce bag of dog treats for Chewbacca for a penny. Normally they sell on their site for $7.99. With the upcoming food shortages, this is my favorite place to stock up on canned goods. If you live in the Mountain or Pacific time zones, you need to get with Martie.com, MARTIE.com. Look for our link on our FreedomizerRadio.com website and get a $10 free just because I told you to go there. Martie.com. Great deals, good feels.
Okay, we're back, and we're going to be talking about this wonderful meeting between Jesus and the woman at the well. Fascinating so far. We're talking a little bit about the differences between Samaritans and Jews and why they had beef. That, I think, was really interesting to me because being in church as long as I've been, nobody really explained what the beef was. Like, they just said that they had beef. You know what I'm saying? Like, they have beef. And like, we get that, but, like, it's interesting to see that it was not just that they had beef, but this was, like, bloody battles. Like, there was bloodshed between them. There were clear reasons why they were rejecting each other.
Guys, I have a serious question. If two vegans are mad at each other, is it still called beef?
I think it's called Impossible Burger. Or Beyond Burger. Maybe Beyond Burger because they're beyond mad. That was bad. Okay, so anyway, I'll have to tell.
No, I'm not even going to acknowledge that. That's horrible.
I'm going to tell my vegan son that. Okay, so anyway. Okay, so before we get too much into talking about the woman and who she is, I want to look at the fact of a meeting at a well. Okay? So I find it interesting that they're meeting at a well, and if you think back through the Old Testament, because really that's what Jesus has for reference, the Old Testament, right? There's a lot of significant stuff that happens at the well. And remember, this is Jacob's well. So it's not just any well.
Like, he drunk from this well and stuff. It'd be like the modern day Justin Bieber sneeze on his tissue.
Well, okay, except, like, if you think about it, Jacob's well is a special well, okay? Wells have this rich history in the patriarchy of Israel. Of course, people are consistently at wells pretty often. But in Israel's history, wells are where the patriarchs of Israel go to meet their brides. Think about it for just a second. This well in particular is where Jacob meets Rachel for the first time. And Jacob is the father of both the Samaritans and the Jews, and he owned and drank from that well. And that's where Jesus intends to visit and show us the profile of his bride, the church. So Jesus is just like the patriarchs in the same tradition, going to the well to meet his bride. Okay, makes sense?
Nope.
Well, okay, so Jesus isn't looking for a woman to marry, but he calls the church his bride. So we're going to get an opportunity to look at the woman at the well as a broader picture, a representation of who the bride of Christ is and who we're supposed to be as a church. And who appears at the well? Not some perfect Jewish woman who has committed her life to holiness and love and is loved and admired by all, but it's a Samaritan woman and one that's clearly an outcast in our own society.
Yeah, they're all like, oh, Samaritans.
Huh? Right, but even the Samaritans don't like her. Like, it's not like just the Jews don't like her. The Samaritans don't like her either.
She's kind of like public enemy number one.
Okay, like it's saying this is why she's there alone at noon. She begins the conversation in obvious hostility, and now we can understand why. I was always like, man, you kind of rude. You just meet somebody, but no, like she remains.
When anyone talks to her, she has kind of a free pass to be a little suspicious.
She can be a little sus, and on top of that,
especially if you're the one who's
right, she could be suspicious of them. Okay, and on top of that, she's gone through quite a bit at this point, right? But on top of that, she's expecting something from Jesus, and it's definitely not the response that Jesus gives her. When Jesus asks her for a drink, she immediately begins to question him about his intentions. Doesn't he think that he's above me and my kind? And then, of course, like, he's not supposed to be talking to women either. So, like, this is a double weird, right? Why is he talking to me? Wouldn't his drinking water be made impure by my hand? Remember, they were considered unclean, so he wasn't supposed to touch her, much less drink the water she drew. Jesus continues to talk to her about spiritual things, but she doesn't even really grasp what he's saying at the time.
Can I take a minute to talk about ritually?
Sure, go for it. Talk about that.
Usually, Jews wouldn't interact with Gentiles, even though Samaritans are technically Gentiles, because they would be ritually unclean. So what does it mean to be ritually unclean? So it wasn't particularly sinful, but in Deuteronomy we get a whole list, or something like that. We get like a whole list of what it means to be ritually unclean, like certain things you can't touch, certain foods you can't eat, like they weren't allowed to eat pig. I think octopus was on the list. No bears. They couldn't eat bears.
Shellfish.
No shellfish, right. So they were given a list of animals that was in land.
Nothing with a cloven hoof.
Yeah. That were ritually unclean to eat. Like, they couldn't eat it. I don't think they couldn't touch it. But they couldn't, like, eat it. The things that were simple as touch.
You couldn't touch, like, lepers or dead things.
Right. You couldn't touch, like, certain bodily fluids. We'll leave it at that.
Sure.
You couldn't touch lepers or dead people. So being ritually unclean wasn't really sin. What was sinful was walking into God's presence while you were unclean, is going into the temple to worship while you're in that unclean state. Pretty much to get clean again, just take back, wait a couple weeks, you're clean again. So that's pretty much. Right.
And it was really, honestly, most of it was to help keep from spreading disease amongst the Israeli nation.
Right.
Like, so yes. And actually, they did consider Samaritans literally unclean, just like they would have a leper.
And I'm pretty sure that I can't say they followed all the rules about ritual cleanliness, but they probably followed most.
I would think that they did. I mean, that was kind of, they were raised to do this. And so, you can imagine being a Samaritan, not having done anything, not actually being sick, but being considered unclean by your neighbor. This is not a good situation.
So probably both of the nations had this false understanding that they were Jacob's line, Abraham's line, and that.
Well, no. Okay, so the Samaritans would recognize that both of them were, but they just felt broadly rejected. The Jews would have considered them traitors to the line of Jacob, because even though they're occupying his territory, to them they made a mockery of their faith. Okay, and so again, not so great. And you can clearly see. Look, so when I read this, I see her first words as hostility. Okay,
probably
like mild hostility. Maybe not rude, but like the equivalent of, why are you looking at me? Why are you talking to me?
If you watch The Chosen, they have a very, very, very accurate representation of the woman as well, I think.
I feel they do a good job of expressing the mild hostility and discomfort she would have felt. A woman's not supposed to be alone in a man's presence, much less a Jew, much less someone that would think that they were too good to talk to her or her kind. She's bringing all this into the conversation, so we can understand her mild hostility and her.
It's kind of just like not saying it. She's like, go away, I'm not supposed to be.
Right, I do not want to be here. Why are you talking to me? Stop it. You know, like she does not have time of day for this right now. Okay, so Jesus attempts to interrupt the woman and disrupt her obvious feelings of rejection by his people. And so he catches her interest by describing this living water. And that excites her, right? She's like, okay, tell me about this water. Because she's clearly having to collect water at noon. She's ostracized.
I would do anything to have water, just accessible to me.
Right.
I don't have to do this.
Sounds so good, because, like, honestly, I can't imagine having to go to a well and collect water. It's got to be an awful chore. But then to have to do so at noontime to avoid the stares and giggles of others has got to be awful as well.
Right. The gossip column will be going crazy.
Yeah, she's super excited to get out of the chore. And so he challenges her then to go and get her husband. Now, before we move on, I just want to deep dive into this just a little bit, because
this is an interesting topic.
Right.
Very small mention, but very interesting.
So I think that we always look at this from like a modern perspective, and we could be completely missing it. Because when he says, okay, so he starts to go into this litany, okay? And I'll actually read what his response is for you to see. It's really interesting because the way we interpret it is usually pretty simple, okay? We think of her bouncing from husband to husband to husband, affair to affair to affair. But first of all, I'm not even sure that's possible in the context of this community. And secondly, I don't hear Jesus in any way talking about her sin. And he usually doesn't miss a beat in talking about someone's sin. Like, he usually addresses that right from the get-go. He'll say something about not sinning anymore or whatever. Like, but he doesn't do that here, which I think is unusual. So her response is that she has no husband. Check this out in verse 17. Jesus responds with a much more specific evaluation of the situation. You're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is you've had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have said is quite true.
So she kind of gasps in disbelief and says, oh, I understand now. You're a prophet.
Right. Okay, so you're reading her mail. Okay, so our Western and modern perspective, we think of this woman as probably an adulterer and a loosely moral woman who's divorced, 5 people, then with 6. But Jesus doesn't seem to be chastising her for her sin.
And the fact that he said that the man you're living with now wasn't your husband, I bet that one's really hard.
I'm sure it did. Because I'm not entirely sure that she was a loosely moral woman. Okay? Because there are possibilities here. So the woman is, at least we're going to say, separated from her husband, not necessarily divorced, okay, but separated from her husband 5 times, now living with a man she's not married to, but only men in this culture could initiate either marriage or divorce. Okay, so I want you to let that hit for just a second. We think of it in modern context where she's divorcing a bunch of men, but that can't possibly be true. she's not allowed to initiate divorce.
Oh, no.
Right. So that means that she's either been divorced, been abandoned, or been widowed. Okay? So there's a couple possibilities here. Also, you know.
I'm saying that it probably wasn't her doing of adultery or cheating.
Right. So she could have been unfaithful, but remember what happened to women who were caught in adultery in the age. She got stoned, and she's clearly still alive. Okay?
Right,
so, I mean, you might have escaped that once or twice, but after a couple of times, don't you think that somebody would have stoned her?
Right. Possible, but not probable.
Not probable, okay? Now, I can only make conjecture, but because most of the time women would be stoned for that offense, we're going to have to assume that that's probably at least not what's happened every time. So other likely reasons she could have been divorced is that she could have been very sickly, and maybe she was becoming sick and becoming a burden to her spouse. She may have been barren, and a man wanted to have children, so when she couldn't bear children, he would divorce her or marry someone who could. And you know how
these are very, very common things back in the day.
These are very common things back in the day.
One is still pretty common today.
Okay, so all of these things would have been extremely disenfranchising, but it also could have been that she could have been stuck in this levirate marriage law.
Right.
Okay, and so what that is that you're married, okay, and your spouse dies, and he's the oldest of the children. And so in order to bear this older son's children so that the name can continue, you're obligated to marry his next oldest brother. And then if that guy dies, you're obligated to marry his next oldest brother. Could be that she's gone through a series of brothers, and that the youngest brother just refuses to actually marry her because he don't want to die too. Maybe he thinks there's something wrong with her. And so he's...
The parents of Widow Jenkins.
Right, so he's taking care of her, and he is exactly... that's a Studio Seagull West reference, if you guys haven't seen the movie.
We're not promoting it, but we're promoting it.
But it's funny.
They're not sponsored, but we're still promoting it.
So it's entirely possible that she's been against her will, forced to move down the line of siblings because she's been widowed 5 times. But to the point, she clearly feels like she's been rejected.
Who wouldn't?
Right. Like, yeah. Like, can we now have a little compassion for this woman, who we usually look at as this sinful woman because she's living with a man outside of wedlock? I mean, so as a woman in those days, it was extremely dangerous to live alone as a widow or a single woman. You depended on your father or your spouse to be able to take care of you, and especially in a place that's dangerous comparative to Israel.
And we're just going to assume that her father is either already dead or has already disowned her.
I mean, we're going to assume something's happened, right? Because he clearly didn't bring her back in. She's living with someone she's not married
and
to.
He's not paying her so well, which was more common than going by yourself.
So I'm going to say this, is that she's been married 5 times. We look at that like, from our modern perspective, this is a loosely moral person. This is someone who doesn't. Yeah, no, she's not taking offense to it, probably because this is not a situation she chose. And she is having to come to terms with it, but this doesn't seem to be the situation that she chose to be in her life. Either she's been barren, or she is sickly, or she's been just left, you know. She has been divorced multiple times, or her spouses have died. In any case, for a woman in this day, this isn't a disparaging of her character. This is actually a sadness in her condition, if that makes sense. There are some bad things that have happened to this lady, clearly, okay? And she can clearly no longer find an upright man who's willing to take care of her, since she's living with someone that she's not married to. She could have been involved. Okay, so here's the thing. She could still be married to the 4th guy, or the 5th guy, right? And just living with another person. So she may have, again, all this is kind of indicative of a woman who's really given up hope that her life is going to get better. It is tough for her. And so since he doesn't come across as being direct about addressing her sin in the situation that she's found herself in, he instead is addressing her heart as a woman who's felt rejected and used by the authorities in her life over and over again. Rejected by the Jews, rejected by her husband, rejected by those around her, and feeling forced into a life of compromise by her circumstances. And that's the reason her next question comes immediately after. She wants to know, will she also be rejected by God because she worships at the mountain as a Samaritan Jew? Jesus confirms that God wants worshipers who worship in spirit and in truth, and then declares himself to be Messiah for the very first time. So it always, if you're like me and you read this scripture, it's a really weird transition. He goes from telling her all these things that she's done that we all consider from the Western mindset, sinful woman. Then she goes, where are we supposed to worship God? Right? Like, really weird transition. But if you think about the fact that she's stuck in this situation, that it was not all of her own making, that maybe part of it she's culpable in, but maybe not all of it. But to the point she feels like she's pressed to compromise, and she comes from a people who have been known for compromise. She wants to know, is God also going to reject me? And that, I think, is a deep question, a heartfelt question, and an important question, right? So once he declares himself Messiah, what does she do?
She runs to the challenge, tells everyone that she can. Then she runs to the next town, tells everyone she can. Runs to the next town, the world's first missionary.
So check this, though. If she was all that rejected by people because she was a horrible person, who would have listened to her? Nobody. But clearly the town responds. You know, I met a man who told me everything I ever did.
And it says many Samaritan states. So.
Right. And they're speaking to her, too, not just by your word, but because we now know him. So our final question is, because remember I said that the patriarchs went to the well to meet their wives, to meet their brides, right? And we know that the church is called the bride of Christ. And Jesus goes to the well, meets a Samaritan woman, and she should be kind of a picture of who we should expect the bride of Christ to be. And it's not that pretty, perfect picture that we think. It's not the person who's done everything right. It's not the person who has served and loved God and done things perfectly and saved a cajillion people. The Samaritan woman looks a lot like our church. She's broken. The world has hurt and rejected her and broken her, just like the world has hurt and rejected us and broken us. In response, we've tried to fill the voids in our own lives through sinful means, only to be left wounded still and wondering if a holy God would still love us just like she did. Nothing that we've done has measured up. Our whole world seems to be bent on reminding us of that. But we receive the grace of God when he notices us. We're not just Jews or Gentiles, but a mixture of both, the church, just like she was. And we share God's grace through Jesus as Messiah by plainly telling our story and how we now know and are known by God, just the same way that she did. It's our testimony that leads others to Christ. We're the bride of Christ, who he met at the well, and we receive the living water today, his Holy Spirit, and bear witness of all the good things that God has done for the least of these, like me. Kind of fun, talking about the woman at the well, right? See, and you did know an awful lot about that story. That's pretty awesome. So we're right about the right time. Do you think we should take a commercial break and come back and do some Q&A?
No.
No, you don't think so? Well, what else do you have to talk about? Okay, then we're going to go to commercial while you're figuring all that out. All right, and we'll see you guys in about 3 minutes.
Earthing, also known as grounding, is the act of touching our body's skin directly to the earth, just like our ancestors did as they slept, sat, and walked on the ground nearly every day of their lives. This simple connection allows Earth's natural negative electrons to enter the human body, pacifying dangerous free radicals, which, if left unchecked, can cause severe damage to cells that can lead to many chronic diseases. Ground Therapy's patented process and suite of products were designed for you to experience all the benefits of grounding in your busy and modern lifestyle. And you'll experience the benefits of grounding within the safety and comfort of your home or office throughout the entire day, just as if you were touching the earth itself.
The information is provided for general informational purposes only. The contents are not intended or implied to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Ground Therapy Incorporated makes no representations about the efficiency, appropriateness, or suitability of any specific tests, procedures, treatments, services, opinions, healthcare providers, or other information that may be contained in or available through the information provided.
Did you know that every time you swipe your debit card, those behind-the-scenes transaction fees make the big banks even richer? In 2016 alone, these fees added up to $60 billion. Yes, that's billion with a B. Well, what if there was a way to have the convenience of a debit card, but reroute those fees from the banksters to organizations actually doing good in the world? Organizations that protect the environment or feed hungry children? What if your swipes could literally change the world? Well, Groundswell SPC has found a way to do just that. We've designed a Visa debit card program that shares transaction fees with your favorite cause. Groundswell partners with nonprofit organizations that promote the card to their supporters. Their supporters then use the card to power the mission of the nonprofit. It's a win-win-win for everyone, except the big banks, of course. Groundswell is about to launch its first cards into market, and we're inviting you to be part of this movement as an investor in the company. Go to WeFunder.com/GroundswellCard to learn more. Set up a free WeFunder account and invest in Groundswell today and get your money on mission.
I'm Lauren Bobert, and I traveled down to McAllen, Texas to the Rio Grande Valley sector to see what's up at our southern border. So here's what's up at the border. Illegal aliens crossing the border, that's up. Sex offenders crossing the border, that's up. Drug trafficking, gun smuggling, human smuggling, that's up. Unaccompanied children being sent on this journey alone, and even worse, given over to the cartel, that is way, way up. You know what's not up at the southern border? Respect for law and order, funding for our border patrol. And where's the media to cover this crisis? More than 70 days ago, Biden named cackling Kamala as border czar, but she hasn't done a single thing to protect the American people. She hasn't even been down here to see the border or the tens of thousands of children wrapped in aluminum foil. You can't just hear about what's happening. You have to come down here to see for yourself, to really understand the devastating reality at our southern border. So I brought Kamala down to see exactly what this regime is responsible for with their man-made crisis. Now, Kamala, I want you to stand here and look at what you've done.
All right, well, we're back. We're going to do some Q&A over what we just learned about the woman of the well.
Yes.
And so I'm really excited.
Ad.
That was, yeah, right. Kind of an old ad. It's hard for me to tell which ones are old and new. So, okay, so let's get into this. I really wanted to focus on the woman and her character. We're going to talk more about things like, living water and stuff like that in future episodes. So I just wanted to really focus on the nature of the Samaritan woman and the nature of us today as the church, as the bride of Christ, okay? So the first question is, have you ever felt that you might be rejected by God for not worshiping or serving him correctly? And if so, how did that impact your view of God? And if you haven't felt that way yourself, and I kind of hope, this is my son, you guys, okay? I kind of hope he hasn't felt that way. I kind of hope that I've taught him. It is, have you ever felt that you might be rejected by God for not worshiping or serving him correctly? Like, I kind of hope that you haven't and that I've trained you better than that, but, like, I think that human nature is that we do, right? We do get worried about that sort of thing.
So I feel like I've had times where I've doubted God a little bit on that subject, but not, like, to that level that I don't think I'm worshiping or serving him correctly. That probably just to, like, God, what's a better way for me to do this? How can I do this better? Not, like, think I'm doing this correctly at all.
Yeah.
I'm just giving up on doing this because I can't do it right.
Right. I can tell you exactly where my struggle is here, okay? Like, I can totally tell you exactly where my struggle is here. And that is that, you know, before I came to Christ, my life was extremely, like, I want to say, like, goal and achievement driven.
Yeah.
Okay? I was a athlete. I was a cheerleader. I was, you know.
She wants to be the golden.
I wanted to be the golden child, yeah. Like the golden child. I was.
Child who had golden medals.
Right. I was much more lovable when I was doing good things, right? And this is kind of how I equated love. And so it's very easy to see where an ego can get involved there, okay? And so my main struggle in serving God is that I'm constantly trying to balance, like he's given me gifts and talents. He clearly wants me to use those for the kingdom. He calls me to do things, but I always want to make sure that I'm doing things in his strength, not mine, to his glory, not mine, and to make sure that my ego is not getting involved. And I do see that if my ego was to get involved in it, that it would be detrimental to the work that God has me doing, and detrimental to me. You know, do I think that there's a high price to pay for that? Yes, absolutely. So how does that impact your view of God? I think that you're constantly afraid that God accepted me at one point but will reject me now because I am not measuring up, because I'm letting myself get too egotistical. I'm, you know, kind of like becoming like Saul and letting the task be more important than God and his character and his glory and his worship. So that's literally always the balance that's in the forethought of my mind. And, you know, probably that's the best place for it to be, so that I'm always being mindful about making sure everything is about God's glory. Do you know what I'm saying? But it's an uncomfortable place to be. I have seen many people who are from, so we've always been in a grace-driven type of a church environment, but I have seen friends in performance-driven church environments, and they can get really, really tied up in this whole concept of having to be perfect.
And that is like really sad, just seeing that in general, but also just in church environments where they're supposed to be like teaching God's word and everyone's still performance driven. Right. And you know, I mean, there's not a body count of how many souls that you're saving. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not even about how effective the task is. It's about whether or not you're serving God and doing the things that he asks you to do. But I think that impacts your view of God very, very negatively. I think that it can make you feel like he is a hard-driven taskmaster, and that that you are obligated to do certain things, and it becomes very difficult, I think, to serve God with a whole heart and with an open heart. So the next one is, yeah, it's about the cutest thing ever, isn't it? So let me ask you another question there, buddy. Are you ready? No, you're not. I'm going to ask it anyway. Have you ever felt rejected or ostracized because of your actions or circumstances? How does that make you feel towards people who have mistreated you? I mean, you're kind of the cool kid. Like, I hate to say it, guys, but he's kind of the cool kid. Like,
I don't.
Not really, though.
You don't think so? You don't think so? He doesn't think so. I think he is.
Just like at church and co-ops.
Okay, at church and co-ops. You're the cool kid. But you think if I dropped you in a public school right now, you would not be?
Oh my gosh. There's so many reasons.
Okay. So we think we would have lost that status there, huh?
If there's any place where I can get in trouble for talking, I don't want to go.
No, we're in so much trouble. That's the only thing I was ever in trouble for as a kid.
Moving too much, like talking too much, I would be in trouble, bro.
I was that kid that they like literally meme about, where they're like, the teacher would move me multiple times. It was like, it doesn't matter where you move me. If you move me next to your desk, I will talk to you. Like, I will find someone to talk to.
If you move me next to the kid who picks his nose the entire time,
I'll still talk to him.
I will talk to him.
Not a problem.
I don't care, bro.
Right.
If you are a human and I can interact with you right now, I am going to. Like,
but we literally ended up with a dog after COVID because I didn't get to interact with humans enough. So I found something furry to interact with. And before that, I was feeding the feral cats in the neighborhood. Like,
yeah,
like there are problems. There are problems.
We were about to adopt a cat. I don't know if that was illegal, but if it wasn't, then we didn't care.
I get lonely. If there's like levels of extrovert, I'm like the top tier extrovert.
Yeah. Oh, also when we were Olivia, we closed the door one time because we would like open the door and look.
Olivia was the cat, by the way.
Yeah. So we would like let them come into the house sometimes, and we closed the door, and she literally ran up our closet. I think this happened twice.
It was the wind. The wind shut the door, and she ran into the closet because she was scared. She was a feral cat. She wasn't used to being inside.
And we like put cat food at the bottom. We opened the door again.
She was so scared, but she wouldn't let us touch her. So
right, she didn't let us touch her at all.
It took us a couple of hours to get her out.
Yeah.
Oh baby. So she was really scared. So tell me a little bit about this. Let's go back to our question here that I don't even remember now. I've got to reopen everything.
Sure.
But have you ever felt rejected or ostracized because of your own actions or beliefs or your circumstances amongst your peers?
So,
or even like, I mean, it's possible that you might have felt like your opinion was unwelcome because you're a young man as opposed to an older man, like to go to a mixed Bible study or something like that, anything like that?
Not really for the second one, but for the first one, kind of, because in case you guys didn't know, I did, well, I'm kind of still doing it, but I did theater for a while, and I went to a community theater. It was Rainbow Company. I had a good time with them. But I was the only one there who was a Christian.
So you could definitely feel like an outsider there, yeah.
Yes, but I did make a lot of friends because I'm just extroverted like that. I think everyone knew. Not a lot of people cared. There were a couple people that I couldn't connect with for that reason. There was one friend that I would just debate with because I don't remember the specific religion, but his mom and dad had different religions, and I was kind of challenging him about that. I was like, are you okay with this? Are they okay with this? And he's like, yeah. I was like, what religion are you? He's like, not really religious. Like, all right. So, I was kind of debating with him about that for a while. But yeah, I didn't have a lot of close friends there. Then again, I only spent 3 months there.
So there you felt a little ostracized, but clearly I don't remember you ever saying that you felt mistreated by them. They were all kind to you.
They were all kind.
They were good to you.
I wouldn't say I'm a single person that I wouldn't want to get saved.
So you clearly felt a heart for them as well.
Right.
You cared about them.
There were a lot of interesting people.
There were. They have some very different ideas and philosophies and understandings of how life works, and that was, not necessarily a bad thing to learn how other people view the world. You know what I'm saying?
Right. So that was kind of a good and bad experience for me, because I got to see what other people's worldviews and how they picture a world from a non-Christian perspective. But I think that was probably my closest to feeling kind of like an outsider.
Right. I
kind of make friends wherever I go. I'll find at least one person to.
Yeah, no, that's true. I do feel like I've experienced this to a certain extent. I'm thinking particularly of a specific job where, again, yes, I was the. I'm not going to say necessarily I was the only professing Christian, but I was the only practicing Christian. Let's put it that way. And when I say I'm the only practicing Christian, that meant that I did business a different way than other people did, and it super duper caused conflict for me over and over and over again. Where I had people literally screaming at me at times. I had people literally getting in my face sometimes. I was threatened to be fired once because I refused to fill a job order because I didn't feel like it was ethical. You know, I kind of looked at them and said, fire me. No, they couldn't. It was no legal grounds for firing them, or for firing me, and I could have gotten them in trouble for doing so. So there I super felt ostracized, and it was definitely what I would have considered a hostile work environment.
Hostile for me at all.
No, this was legitimately hostile. I still have one good friend from that job who was really just about her business and taking care of things, didn't care how I did what I did, you know, as long as I was taking care of business, you know. But it can be very difficult because I feel like when we live in a way that honors God, it creates a contrast for people who aren't living that same way. And it can make them feel accused in some sort of way. You know what I'm saying? And super, I was not meaning to accuse anyone else of doing anything bad. I simply wasn't going to do what they were doing. And that still causes conflict for people. They're not happier about that. How did I feel towards those people? I'm going to say it was really hard to continue to pray for them. It was. Sometimes I was like, I don't feel like praying for this person today. They were super mean to me. You know, they you know, publicly criticized me and embarrassed me about, you know, the fact that I don't curse at work, or the fact that, you know, I was doing things differently. Like, you know, my boss scolded me for not filling this job order, and I had to explain to them why I wouldn't do it. And they threatened to fire me. Like, I don't feel like praying for her today. And I'm not going to lie, I didn't always, and we didn't see eye to eye, and I did super feel like an outsider at that job. And it was tough. So, you know, what I will say is that it can be really, really hard when you feel rejected, when you feel ostracized, to be able to remain faithful to the people that you're around and that God's put in your life. I've also had situations at church where there were some lies that were spread about me by someone very close to me. And some people knew me very, very well and just threw that to the side, knowing the other person was being deceitful. And other people who didn't know me very well, of course, became very guarded, and they thought that, you know, these things were true. And so they kind of pushed me out of their lives and wouldn't allow me around their teens or their kids or whatever, because I was that influence. And that was really hard. That's hurtful, because those are the people in your life who you feel like are supposed to be there for you, you know. And church hurt is tough sometimes. And, you know, God was so funny about some of the circumstance, because there was a couple people in particular who I felt I was closer to than clearly I was. They didn't know that they were lies. And they treated me according to what they had heard. I can't necessarily blame them for that, right? But it was painful to go through. And God allowed me to sit on that for a few years before reintroducing me to those people. they had like left the church for a while and then come back, and at that point I was, calmer and not as hurt and able to address the fact that I was still holding things against them, even though they couldn't possibly have known that I didn't do the things that I was accused of having done. Like, that wasn't the thing, but they couldn't have known that because they weren't involved. I mean, I shouldn't be upset, but I was, you know what I mean? So, you have to really get before God on those sorts of things, because it can be really tough. So, last one. Can you think of anyone, and I'm not talking about one person in particular, I'm talking about like groups.
Should I name them?
No, like please don't use names.
All right.
You may have a name that comes to mind, but let's talk about groups of people instead. Is there anyone in our current culture or society who may have felt or be feeling ostracized by the church or by God? And how do you think that God would want us to engage with those people? So who do you think, in your mind?
So there's just one person, right?
No names. Here I'm definitely going to think about people in the LGBTQ A plus. I think those are. IA plus. I don't know all the acronyms.
I think it is.
Whatever it is. All the folks with these alternative lifestyles. Let's put it this way. It's so much cheaper, so much shorter just to say people in alternative lifestyles.
Skittles is much easier to say.
Well, okay. Then taste the rainbow. Got it. So, do I think that they feel ostracized by the church or by God? Certainly. And I think that I've been talking with a few of my friends, and I kind of have determined that a lot of it is worldview, that Christians think of sin as not a part of the individual, but just something that the individual has done or engaged in, where people who are secular humanists, which is the broad social construct of our society, they really think of everything that they do and think is part of who they are, an essential part of their identity. And so if you say that this is sinful and it's hurtful to you, they don't feel like you're attacking something that is going to hurt them for their own good, but they feel like you're attacking them in particular. It is really difficult for people who are Christians who really, well, first of all, there are Christians who really do hate people in alternative lifestyles and really are hateful towards them and really are like whatever the phobia is. Like it's not fake. There are, right, whatever the phobia is, there's people who are engaging in the phobia. And they really are not okay with these sorts of things. Or the people who are engaging them. And that's tough, right? That's a whole thing too, right? But even for people who are not fearful or not dealing with that kind of challenge, I think that we find that same language almost. I can say something, but it's received in a way I never would have intended it to be received. And because of that, I feel like when we talk to somebody who is engaged in some alternative lifestyle of some sort, it's very difficult for us to get across a message of love and compassion, no matter how hard we're trying to engage in that. Because the thing that we're saying that we think is loving, they're receiving as being a personal criticism of their character and hateful. And that's something that we need to find a way to overcome. I also feel like currently our culture and our society is starting to kind of turn towards white men in particular in a way that is really critical and discouraging and hateful. So I don't know if you felt like a recipient of that at all.
No.
Not yet? No.
I didn't have anything in English. You are a bigoted, privileged, milk white man.
Oh.
Man.
I'm glad. And obviously,
I wouldn't be surprised if someone did that.
Around here we treasure you, right? But
around here's white.
I mean, yes, but there's a lot of girls around here, and we think you're pretty awesome. So, but I think that is another group that's probably feeling ostracized, and then there are groups that feel historically ostracized and underrepresented. So we're going to say that's the minority populations in our country. Black people, people of color, all kinds. They'll feel, certainly underrepresented and ostracized from what's perceived as a colonistic church, which is interesting because, of course, the gospel didn't come to Europe for some time. It first spread in the Middle East and then in Africa, right, before it ever came to Europe. So I think that they can feel ostracized. So how are we called to approach people when they're feeling ostracized by the church or when they're feeling ostracized by God?
Well, by the church, you should probably tell them that God's never going to stop chasing you. That's what I do. That's what I do. Is when they're like, I don't think my church loves me. I don't think that church is the right place for me. I'm like, okay, God will never stop chasing you. And whatever you do, he will leave the 99 and come get you.
That's good advice.
I've never really had someone who felt rejected by God, so I'm not entirely sure what to do in that scenario. I don't think I've ever met someone so broken down that they felt rejected that God didn't even want them.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what. I think that, I think you'll eventually run into that kind of person, right? I think another tip when someone feels like the church has rejected them, because a lot of people have felt that we're not supposed to be judging Christianity based on the worst people we know who are Christians.
Right. So we have to be the good examples that people will say, oh, you know a good example of a Christian? That person over there, that person over there.
I think the best example we know of a Christian is Jesus. And that I think is the problem is that I think that people think about themselves as following a church or following a faith, and then that's when they start to look around at the people, and we're all still broken, mate. Like we're here because we're still a little messed up. You know what I mean? But we should all be following Christ and not following people.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think that I do think that it's a different thing when people feel rejected by God. And what I will say is that my oldest daughter, Mariah, has been a missionary a couple of times. And what's really important that they do as missionaries is before they go out into a culture, they learn a little bit about the culture. And you guys actually studied this a little bit when you were at youth camp this year, remember? And he talked about how different cultures speak about God in different ways. And specifically, he was talking about Western thought, and then also thoughts of, how cultures that are less individualistic think about it. To the point, he was saying we need to study the culture and speak into the culture in a way that they understand. And I feel like we need to start doing that as Christians in America and in the West with our own culture and understand a little bit about secular humanism and to be able to speak their language at least enough to understand that, like, what we're saying that we think is loving isn't being received, and we have to find new ways to say it in a way where they can receive that. I think that's super duper important. And then we can start to meet the woman at the well, right? Well, might be a dude. Could be a dude, could be anybody.
Could be a dude, Ginger, whatever.
But so it's the point of Jesus meeting his church and learning who they are and extending love and grace to them while they learn to walk in his ways, and that's awesome. So, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah.
No, we're all good? All right. Well, God bless you guys. I'm so thankful that you came. Did you want to pray us out? I think you missed prayer again.
Yep. That's all.
That's all.
Come on the show and talk about the Lord as well. We're not pushing through topics. We pray that everyone has a more deep understanding of how to approach people and what to do. And we pray that everybody has a good time at the youth group on Wednesday or Sunday, whatever.
Amen. Well, thanks for the awesome prayer and all your insights. You were fantastic today, Cross. I appreciate it. Nope. Did you like today's topic?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I think probably next week we're going to talk about this living water. What is this living water that she's talking about? We'll probably deep dive into that.
The water that has like living bacteria in it.
Right. I was about to say that's not living water. That's quick water. So definitely not what he's talking about. That's more
water
likely.
of life. That's water of death.
Right. That's more likely what was in the well. All right. Well, we'll definitely talk about it next week, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Los introduzco a Barkley. Cuando Barkley huele gas, huye rápido. Barkley luego llama al 911 y a Southwest Gas desde un lugar seguro.
¿El perro acaba de marcar el 911?
We're chatting with our guest, 811 Megaphone Man.
Call 811 before you dig.
You never stray from your mission of letting homeowners, landscapers, and excavators know you should always call 811 before you dig.
Call 811.
Brought to you by Southwest Gas.